Hi everybody. Around this time of year, springtime, September, October, I start making Christmas cakes for various friends and family and so on. And unlike the so-called boiled fruit cake that I did a little while ago, this recipe actually does keep for quite some time. The boiled fruit cake perhaps keeps for a couple of weeks in a closed container, but this one would keep for at least till Christmas, or definitely quite a lot longer. Up to a year or more in a cool, dark place. I use a recipe, based on a recipe, from New Zealand's old favourite, Edmund's cookbook. And I first started making this recipe when I was in high school, so it's quite a while ago. As you'll see, I've made a few changes to it. Lots of scribbles down here. You need to start preparing your fruit at least a day before you're going to make the cake, or even longer. My fruit has been soaking here for probably about 3 days. And I use a mixture of sultanas, raisins, currants, and some golden sultanas, mixed peel, and cherries. You can use the pre-prepared mixed fruit, but either way, whichever you prefer. About 1200 grams of mixed fruit. Now, I've put this fruit in the bowl and it's been soaked here with these about 300 mils of ginger beer I use this time. The recipe actually calls for ginger ale. Doesn't matter. Really, whatever sort of liquid you use. If you'd prefer to use orange juice or even some parts of alcohol, is not a problem. And you'll be able to see, if I lift it up, there's barely any liquid left. It's actually really soaked in really well. Right, the other preparation you need to do ahead of time is your cake tin. Because it's going to be cooked in the oven for about 3 hours, I like to double line it, and the bottom and the sides. The oven temperature is around about 150 Celsius. If it starts to brown towards the end of the 3-hour cooking time, then you can cover it with a piece of foil and even turn the oven down a little. Okay. So firstly, butter and sugar. About 225 grams of butter and 180 grams of caster sugar. And I like to cream that really well. Actually, this is the time when I go and prepare my cake tins and so on while it's creaming. And then we add our essences. I'm just going to turn it on slightly. So, a teaspoon of vanilla. A teaspoon of almond essence. And usually I would add a teaspoon of lemon essence, but I don't have any at the moment, so I'm going to use some grated lemon rind. Finely grated from 1 lemon. Now I like to add all those essences, to the butter and sugar now, because the flavours go into the butter and it absorbs it really well. Next thing is to add the eggs. Make sure that the eggs are room temperature, because otherwise when you add them, it's going to affect the butter and coagulate it or chill it down. So 4 eggs, 1 at a time. If while you're adding the eggs, the mixture starts to curdle a little bit, which you can see it has a little bit here, you can add a little flour, but I'm not too worried. I think it's going to mix in all right. Just scrape that down. Now, once the eggs are mixed into your butter and sugar mixture, what I find the easiest way to handle it is to tip it into the fruit mixture. So I just put the whole lot into there and then mix it in. This recipe, well, this mixture I'm making now is actually for a wedding cake that I'm doing in October, but I want to make it well ahead of time, so it'll be about a month maturing till the wedding happens. It's I don't know the couple, but I've been asked to make it for a sort of two 80-year-olds, which is rather lovely. Right, next thing to do is add the flour and the baking powder. 300 grams of flour and a teaspoon of baking powder. I think that looks pretty good. So as I said, 300 grams of flour. I have changed this for to make it gluten-free. So what I do is substitute the flour for ground almonds and buckwheat flour. So just sift this over. And then mix it in. And what I do here, and actually I find this a lot easier than, I have got a wooden spoon for mixing, and a short handled one like this is actually probably the best, but actually what's even simpler is just to use your hand. So if your hand's obviously clean and mix it in like that, it just makes it so much easier. And I think perhaps the warmth of your hand just helps it blend a little bit as well. I especially need to do this when I'm doing a double mixture, because it's really hard to mix with the wooden spoon. You can see how much easier it actually is. Scooping it from the bottom just to see if there's any unmixed mixture down there. And yeah, you can see it's pretty well mixed now. Blend it through. It's quite thick mixture, but that's fine. Alright, so into the cake tin. So using your hand is actually much easier too, to pop it in there. And I like to sort of place it around the base of the tin so that it's reasonably well distributed. It does rise a bit, but not a lot. And of course you can use a square tin if you prefer, or when I'm doing my Christmas cake decorating classes in December, I make a lot of little cakes in the little mini cake tins.
In October?
No, but I make the cake, yes, well that's right, I make the cakes earlier. Last year I actually blew up my Kenwood shed. Well, it wasn't really my fault, it was getting pretty old, but when I was in the middle of making those little Christmas cakes for the class. Just sort of, not really pressing it down, but making sure that there's sort of no kind of air bubbles and sort of holes, because I want it to be reasonably smooth on top. Now, this is not a heavy fruit cake, it's not a really dark one, but for a really heavy fruit cake, you really need to make a hollow, well, particularly if you're going to be decorating it. You need to hollow it out in the centre so that when it actually rises, you end up with a flat cake. I'm going to sort of do that slightly, but because I would like to decorate this when it's before the wedding. So a little slight hollow in the middle, alright? And then, as I said, when it rises, it's going to end up to be flat. And then in the oven for around the 3 hours at 150 Celsius. Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. 275, something like that. If that's the method you use, you'll probably know. Right, so just scraping the last little bits here. And just smoothing it out a little bit. And now I'm off to have a coffee. I often have a coffee with a slice of that boiled fruit cake. See when it comes out of the oven. Right, so my cakes come out of the oven, and sometimes it does take a little bit longer than the 3 hours. Depends on the size of your tin. This is a 23 centimetre cake tin, but if you're using a bigger tin, a square one perhaps, it will not take quite as long. So just test with your skewer. So when I bring it out of the oven, I like to pour some alcohol over it, and I just noticed that this Calvados bottle is practically empty, so I thought I'd use it. Sometimes I use brandy, you could use whiskey, Grand Marnier, Cointreau, any of those things. So we're just pouring it over, and of course it's because the cake's hot, it's going to evaporate pretty quickly. And then what I would do is add more alcohol. Well, when the cake's cool, tomorrow morning, overnight, cooling, I would wrap it well with baking paper and foil and put it away in a cool, dark place. And then perhaps every week or 10 days or so until Christmas, pour over a little more of your chosen alcohol. It does evaporate, so really you're not getting the actual alcohol itself. It's not making the cake incredibly alcoholic, but it just gives that little bit of extra flavour, and just helps to keep it a bit longer. So there we are, that's my fruit cake, which is going to be long keeping, and I'm going to turn it to a wedding cake in about a month's time.